Hi there, welcome to our tutorial on how to get your mileage log automatically filled in using the MileageAce system. Now let me show you an account that has not been set up. So for example, if you just got your MileageAce device and you haven't set anything up other than just linking the device to your account, and you start to drive, this is what your mileage log will look like. And you can see there's a lot of information here, but it's not quite ready for the IRS yet. And actually taking it that little step to be ready for the IRS, which is filling in the purpose, could actually be quite a bit of work because you're going to have to dig through your trips and find which ones were for business, and you'll have to manually set them to business, and then you're going to have to type in your purpose. So for example, now that's not a lot of work, but it could take time, right, to find every trip. Now let me show you another account that has the exact same trips in it, but all the automatic features that we're going to go through in this tutorial were used. So take a look. These are the same trips as I mentioned, but look at this mileage log. Look how different it looks. All of the trips are automatically already set to business. The purpose is filled in. The destination is even named on most of these trips. So this is what you want because this is what the IRS needs, this is what your employer needs, and it can all be done on the MileageAce website automatically, just by taking a little bit of time up front to set up your account the right way for how you drive. So how does the MileageAce system know when you're on business? Well, there are three ways to do this. The first is to actually just use the business button on the MileageAce device. The business button is this big blue button that's on it right here. So if you press this down, it will turn blue. It'll probably also blink green, but it will mostly be blue. If this is blue, it's going to manually set every trip you drive to business. So what happens is if you were to just use that button, you would log in here and your trips for business would be set to business. But you would still not have your purpose filled in, and the destination would still only have the address you drove to. So it would set your trip to business, but you'd still be missing some details. The other two tools are business hours and locations. They also fill in the purpose and name the destination. Now, I cannot stress how important it is for you to take the time to set up your account like this now, because otherwise your log will look like this and you will have a lot of work left. Now, if you've already put the MileageAce in your car and driven some trips and have a mileage log that looks like this, don't freak out, it's fine, and hang on till the end of this tutorial and I'll come back to this account and I'll show you what you can do to start setting your account up. But it's really important that you still go through what we do in this tutorial to set up your account because that's still going to be something you need to do. So let's talk about locations and business hours. Now as I go into this, I actually want to introduce my guest. I have a guest here. This is Teresa.
Hello.
Teresa is a real estate agent, and she's also a new client, and she's never been through this system before. So as I walk you through this, she'll jump in if she has any questions, and hopefully that'll reflect questions that you have as well. So let's talk about business hours and locations. We can find our locations over here by clicking that My Locations button, or you can go up to your email address and select My Saved Locations. And this account, as you can see, has no locations in it other than the original account address. So we can go and manually add locations by clicking that button. And to manually add a location, it's very straightforward and simple. You just drag this cursor around to the place you want to create a location, and then you can fill in these fields. And the thing I want to really cover, because there are other tutorials that will specifically go over how you edit and add and create locations, which I'm not going to go into detail here, but the thing I just really want to emphasize is that you only want to enter the information that you know. So if you're creating a large area, and we'll talk about this later, you really don't want to name it because you can't name it specific enough. If you drive over here, it's going to be a different location than if you drive in here. So you're going to leave this name blank. However, if it's an actual physical address, like for example here, if we were to create something around Lowe's, there's Lowe's. If we were to create a location around Lowe's, we could actually name this Lowe's. The same rules apply down here to these settings. Set location as business, personal, or neither. You'll only want to set to business or personal if you know for sure you always only drive there for business or personal reasons. And the other thing is to set a default purpose and a default client. The same rules apply. We only want to add the information we know. However, a lot of the time, with purpose especially, we want to add a generic purpose. So, for example, Teresa is a real estate agent. Mm-hmm. Teresa, if you were to create a large location around where you show properties, while you might not always be right at what your purpose is, you really would want to add this thing, add a purpose that says showing properties. Because remember when we looked at that blank mileage log?
Yeah.
All the purposes were unfilled, but everything else was actually okay for the IRS. All you'd have to do is set the trips to be business. What this would do is this would automatically fill in the purpose of those trips. So your trips would at least have showing properties filled in for the purpose.
So it'd be defaulted.
Exactly. Yeah. But we're going to go into this in more detail in just a minute. So that's all there is to it with locations. And then business hours are the same thing. We can add new business hours here, and then we just select the days of the week and the hours, and then you can add only the information you need. So if you don't know whether hours are for business or personal because you drive both for business and personal during those hours, you would just leave these blank. And for purpose, the same thing applies. Leave it blank if you don't know, and client, the same exact thing. So the question for you and for Teresa and for me and for you watching this is, what do you need to set up to fit your driving? What are the locations you need to create? What are the business hours you need to create to fit your driving?
Yeah.
Well, we have a worksheet that we're going to now start going through. And if you go through this with us, you will identify all of the locations and business hours that you need to create for your driving to get your log filled in for you. So that you can find this worksheet right here by selecting the FAQ and expanding that. And you see in your list it says automating your log. So we can click on that. And then we want this link here that says worksheet for recommended tutorial. So if we click on that, this little description opens up over here. And all we want to do is click on this link here, and that'll download the Excel worksheet. But I've already downloaded it and I have it set up right now. So let's just hop over and take a look at that. And here we are. This is our worksheet that we're going to go through. So you can see the worksheet is really just a series of lists where we start to identify business locations, business areas, things like that.
Is this something that we upload, or is this just for my own use?
This is just for your own use. You don't upload it to the website. So you're just going to describe things here for you. So for example, you might say your home office, right? And then label the purpose, whatever, returning to the office. And then you would have to hop over to the website and create that location right here by manually adding the location at your home office. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so that's what we're going to do once you have this worksheet filled out. Now, the worksheet has 9 sheets. So if you look down below, there's business locations, business areas, areas where you mix business and personal driving. There's 9 of them. And that might seem like a lot, but each one corresponds to slightly different settings that you'll have to apply when you go to create the locations and business hours. And we've just separated them out so that they're really easy to understand. And what'll happen is you probably will not have things in each of these lists. Most likely there will be some empty lists here, and that's perfectly fine. You just want to fill in whatever works for your driving habits, okay?
Got it.
So before I actually start going through these lists, I want to point out 2 things that each of these sheets have. The first is that if you scroll to the second page over here, every one of these sheets has a screenshot of the settings that you want to apply. So for this one here, we're talking about business only locations, which are just a single address. When you'd go to create it, you want to name your location, as it says, and you're going to definitely want to select business. You're also going to want to add your purpose if you can, and add your client if you can.
A snapshot, basically. To show you exactly how to fill it out online.
Exactly. It's just a snapshot to show you what the settings are that you should add. And pay in particular attention to these down here. Set location as, because that's mostly the thing that's going to change as we go through this. Okay? And the other thing to notice is that each list has a description of what you're adding. So for business only locations, we're talking about a list of locations where you only drive to for business. Many of these you'll also know the purpose and the client if there is one. You're encouraged to enter as much information as you can. And the thing when we say enter as much information as you can, we're really trying to talk about the purpose. I already mentioned this, but just to emphasize again, please fill in the purpose as much as you can whenever you can.
But what if I already have a list of like clients?
If you already have a list of clients, that's a great question because we have an item right here that says client list. You can actually import a CSV file, which is just a spreadsheet that Excel can generate, or Numbers, any kind of spreadsheet software can generate a CSV file. And then you would just upload it on our website. Oh, let me cancel out of this. You upload it right here. You go to the locations page and it says upload CSV file. So you just click on that and it shows you the format that your file should be in.
Oh, nice.
And then you just drop it or select it here and hit upload now, and all those client locations will get automatically created. And you can do this, you know, as your client list grows and grows, you can just add more clients to it. So let's go back and talk about this. Now, so let's talk about your other locations that you may not have in a list. This right here is really just kind of a jumping off point for you. We're trying to get you to start thinking about what are the places that you should write down. So your home office, the purpose whenever you drive to your home office is returning to the office. Does that make sense? So if you have office locations, other locations, you'd have the same purpose. Because it's always the purpose you have when you're driving to that location, okay? So, for example, if you're going to Staples as a real estate agent, you probably go to Staples.
To get supplies.
Exactly. So you'd say something like purchasing supplies. The same thing with the banks. When you go to the bank, well, their purpose, banking. And then you may have a different purpose occasionally, right? Like sometime you might have a meeting with a loan officer, things like that. Well, I would put banking there for your general purpose for the location, and then you can go in and manually edit that trip at some point in the future when you want to change the purpose. If there's going to be a couple different times when you have different locations, use the purpose that's the most common purpose. So all you're going to do is create these locations, and really what you want to think about is create as many as you can, because this is the most specific business type of thing that you can create. So this will fill in your log the most specific way it possibly can, okay? So let's talk about our second list, which is business areas. And the reason why we create areas is because a lot of us drive to new locations, especially you as a real estate agent. You drive to a lot of new places that you've never been to before. So you can't create locations at those places because you haven't been there yet.
Correct.
That's what areas are for. Areas will find those new locations and fill the information in for you. Okay? So this is actually really powerful for a lot of different people. And areas, we call them areas, but they're really still just locations. The only thing that makes them an area is that the radius makes it bigger than a single address. So we already kind of talked about that. And you'll notice that with areas in particular, something I already also mentioned, is that we want to leave the location name blank because it's larger than a single address. And when you leave the location name blank, it uses the address you drove to, okay? So for business areas, business only areas, let's talk about if you're a real estate agent, since we have Teresa here who's a real estate agent. If you sell real estate in Ventura County, for example, Ventura County, and you might want to say what's your most common business purpose?
Showing properties.
Okay, showing property. Okay, so that's your most common business purpose, right? So if we were to go and create this over on the website, we would go manually add a location. And then we're going to create Ventura County, right? Which is pretty big. It's like that big. So that's a lot of area. And remember, we'd leave this location name blank and would set this to business, and our purpose would be showing a property, right? Now, for you, would this work?
Well, it depends. I sometimes drive for personal use in there too.
So Teresa could not create a business location that's this large, because she lives in Ventura. So she's got a lot of personal driving in here too.
But if you were to slow it down into like neighborhoods or whatnot, that would work for me.
Exactly. That's exactly what you should do. So you don't want business locations to overlap areas where you might drive for personal reasons as well. So we would actually just create a whole bunch of smaller locations that cover neighborhoods, right? We could get down to the neighborhood size, where we're just covering a small area, or we could cover parts of the city, parts of town that you only go to for business reasons. So that's really what you'd want to do. So think about where you drive and create these locations for only business around places that you're only for business, okay? So that, I think that's pretty common sense. So in your case over here, rather than saying Ventura County, right, we would probably say business areas in Ventura County, right? And you could actually name these if you want. You could say something like 5 Points, which is a neighborhood. Or you could just leave it at business areas in Ventura County and know that you're going to go over to the website and create a whole bunch of these, okay? It's up to you. This is flexible, but just give yourself enough information so that you don't miss anything.
Got it.
Okay? And then the next thing we're going to talk about, the next list, is areas you mix business and personal driving. So this actually goes back to the last thing we talked about, where you couldn't create a Ventura County location because you have a lot of personal driving inside of that. So here you actually can create that location for Ventura County. And here's what's interesting. You can actually give it the same purpose.
Why do you do that?
That's a great question. So you notice the only thing that's different between this list and the last list is this business setting, business or personal. It's business. It's neither. Okay. So what that means, so let's create this location. So we can drag it to cover the size of Ventura County. And what we're going to do is we're going to set this to neither. And so what that means is that anytime you drive inside this location, the only part of your log that will get filled in is your business purpose, which will say showing a property, okay? And that allows you to use the business button when you're on business, and the business button will actually fill this part in. So they can all kind of work in conjunction. And you can also have business hours and other business locations inside of this that will all work together to fill your login correctly. Okay, so in your case, you could create a big location like this, or if you have other purposes in other locations or other areas, you can create those too. So we're really talking about just creating and trying to cover everywhere we could potentially drive for business and adding the purpose for those places. Okay? So that covers our areas where we mix business and personal driving. And at this point, we've really covered all the really important aspects of this worksheet. We just need to fill out the rest of them. So the next sheet is specific locations that you mix business and personal driving. In this case, we're talking about stores. So if you're in construction, you might drive to Home Depot for business and also for personal reasons when you work on your house. Or restaurants where you go to for business, or you also take your family for fun. So the last two lists that we have are for personal reasons.
So do I need to fill this out for every place I drive for personal use?
No, you don't. That's a good question, and it's something you don't have to do, because the Mileage Ace will default. Anytime you drive to a location that doesn't have any settings that apply to it, it will automatically set those trips to personal anyway. So what really matters is that you cover the personal areas and personal only locations that are inside of the business locations that you already set. So you don't really have to worry about personal locations inside your mixed locations. You only have to worry about them inside your business areas, because your business areas are going to set it to business, and then the personal areas will set it back to personal.
Just so you make sure that you're not accidentally setting a personal trip to business.
Exactly. You don't want to have personal trips set to business. So that's what this is for. So any large areas that you only go to for personal reasons, and also specific locations like the grocery store, if you take your school, where you take your kids, or parks, friends' houses and relatives' houses, places you only go to for personal reasons.
Got it.
Yeah, so you're done with your locations. You don't have to add any more locations. And then the last three sheets of this worksheet are just about hours, okay? And hours, let's take it over here. Hours are really going to depend on what kind of job you have. So if you have a very predictable job with very predictable hours, this might be the easiest way to at least set your trips to be business trips, right? Because you can just set hours that you drive, and all the trips during those hours will get set to business. So that's really easy. But if you have a more complicated schedule where you mix business and personal driving, and you can't necessarily predict when you will or will not be on business, that's where the mixed hours come in. And remember, these are all business hours. And when we say mixed hours, we're just talking about different settings over here. So for the mixed The important setting is to leave business and personal unchecked. So we just want to leave those blank. These settings are really just the exact same as those areas and locations where we mixed business and personal, where you want to add a purpose, but you want to just add the most generic common purpose that you can. And then the last thing is personal hours, right? And personal hours are just simply hours that you know for sure that you are only do personal things. A good example would be if you only work during the normal work week, you can say something like weekends, right? And you may not need a start or end time. You could say 12 a.m. to 12 to midnight. So I think hours are pretty self-explanatory. And I just want to repeat this so that it makes sense. All these things, both business hours and locations and the business button, they're all going to work together to fill in your log as accurately as possible. So don't worry about if your locations overlap each other, if you have hours that overlap each other. The MileageAce system will figure out which settings to apply. So just fill out the lists and add the information on the website, and the MileageAce system will do the rest of the work. Now that's all you need to do for this worksheet. And before we go, I just wanted to hop back and talk about this account where there were trips that were uploaded that didn't get any information filled in by the automatic settings. So you kind of have this default mileage log. Well, don't worry about this because you can actually start to create your automatic settings straight from this page using the trips that you've already driven to. So for example, if we click on this trip right here, you'll notice over on the map that the start and end points all have a circle around them. That's the start point. If we go over to the end point, you'll notice the same thing. And that's because the MileageAce automatically creates new locations anytime you drive somewhere that you've never been to. Let me show you what I mean. I'm going to click on this trip right here. And let's say that this is our office that we've driven to. So we'll just call it the office. And you can increase the radius if you want to. Just one thing to point out, if you increase the radius, it will not show up on this map. You'll just have to kind of eyeball it. But let's just call it the office. And then we'll set it to a business location. And we'll just say the purpose was returning to the office. Now if I hit save, watch what happens. Look at the log now. You'll notice how we've actually driven to the office a number of times. And that all got filled in. The destination is now called the office. And look at this, we've driven to it several times and it all got filled in. Our purpose got added as well. And you'll notice that we had already edited our purpose on this trip. So this purpose didn't get changed because we'd already set it to be something unique. Now the one thing to point out here is that these trips, even though the destination and purpose got added, they did not get set to business. Now this is a really important thing to understand, is that just because you drove to a business location doesn't necessarily mean that it's a business trip, because you've driven to a location from somewhere that is a personal location. And what that means is a business trip has to be from one business location to another business location. So it's really easy for you to take care of. All you got to do is say, oh, okay, if this was a business trip, just click that and you'll set it to business and you're done. So just now you can quickly scan through these trips that got updated and update the ones to business that you want and leave the ones that were not business, just leave them alone, leave them to personal. It's totally fine if they have a business purpose for them. As long as it's a personal trip, the IRS doesn't care. They're never going to see it. Your employer's never going to see it, because when you go to create your mileage report, you're only going to put the business trips in it. So these personal trips won't show up in your reports at all. So that's all there is to it. Go ahead and get started on this. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, you can always check out our other tutorials, or just give us a call or send us an email and we'll try to help you out as best as we can. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.